How do you do, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, the podcast. And I am your host, Mike Luck. And this episode is the first in what was originally going to be a single episode. I've had to slice it into two parts. A sort of a Kill Bill type situation. It's all one thing, but you break it in half, it's a little easier to digest. This episode, we're delving into the darkness. Cover the Black Lodge. The concept, the idea, where it started, and what it means in the field of occultism, esotericism, whatever you prefer to call it. Now, the reason I broke this into two parts is I want to cover the actual concept itself and kind of trace it through occult history. And then the second episode is more my own theories and ideas, like what I think, like if you're looking for an actual concentrated group of evil ne'er-do-wells, people using occultism for bad things. The secret religion of the elite apex predators who run the planet. That's what we're going to get into on the second part. But to get there, we have to take a trip through history, occult history. So, in the hidden corridors of human history, beyond the reach of conventional historical narratives, there exists a concept, both chilling but compelling. That is the Black Lodge. This episode will be exploring one of the most complex, multi-layered narratives in Western esotericism, bridging the late 19th century theosophy to fin-de-siecle ritual magic to Cold War ufology and modern studies of esoteric conspiracy theory networks. The Black Lodge represents not merely a fictional construct, but a potent paradigm, if you will, through which occultists, historians, and researchers have sought to understand the forces of counter-initiation, operating beyond and behind global affairs throughout our history. Let's go! The modern concept of the Black Lodge was codified primarily by Helena, magical ice cream candy cakes, Petrovna, Blavatsky, and the early Theosophical Society in the late 19th century. If you listen to the last episode on Kenneth Grant, I kind of intimated, or flat out said, more than once I believe, how the specter of Victorian era and Edwardian era sensibilities still linger throughout much of modern occultism. And this is the apex point of all of that. So in her seminal works, Isis Unveiled, 1877, and The Secret Doctrine, 1888, Blavatsky posited a cosmic dualism between two hidden spiritual hierarchies directing human evolution. That's the name of the game. Everything is all about human evolution. That's the grand work, the magnum opus, if you will. And a lot of this sounds racist, but I don't know if that's directly intentional, but you'll definitely know when we get to the actual real racism, because it's pretty blatant. Anywho, so there's the Great White Brotherhood, or the Masters of the Ancient Wisdom, aka the Mahatmas, and then there's the Brothers of the Shadow, often termed the Dark Lodge or Black Lodge. So, according to Theosophical lore, the Black Lodge originated in the fallen continent of Atlantis, or on the fallen continent of Atlantis. Blavatsky asserted that Atlantean sorcerers abused spiritual mechanics for egocentric domination, inflation of the ego, through sensual gratification, and abused their powers for material power, or to gain material power. This, in essence, is what triggered the cataclysmic sinking of the lost continent. The survivors of this left-hand path allegedly preserved their lineages through secret societies from across Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Blavatsky routinely conflated these black magicians with real-world groups, such as Tibetan Dugpas, which is a derogatory misapplication of the Tibetan Bon or Sakyapa/Kagyupa traditions, and I'm probably going to butcher a lot of foreign words. I apologize in advance. And various European occult societies that essentially opposed her mission. So this is where you first start seeing this term thrown around a lot, and almost all of it hinges on Blavatsky said so. So in this view, members of the Black Lodge aren't necessarily cartoonishly evil, like mustache-twirling, tie to the railroad tracks bad guys, but instead they're spiritual adepts who refuse to yield their egocentric individuality to the cosmic evolutionary plan, instead seeking personal immortality and material control. In the Western ritual magic tradition, the concept evolved from a global conspiracy of sorcerers into a specific spiritual hazard and a structural grade within esoteric hierarchies. And this may also, in the process of these two episodes, may also unveil a bit of why so many of these secret occult societies operate on hierarchical structures, grades of initiation and passing through the gates, what have you, etc., things like that. When the Golden Dawn split in the early 1900s, MacGregor Mathers accused his rival, Annie Besant, and various rebellious fractions within the order of being manipulated by, quote, secret agents of the Black Lodge, unquote. So in Golden Dawn parlance, the Black Lodge represented any esoteric body using astral projection, hypnotic manipulation, or non-consensual magic to bind the wills of seekers or subvert legitimate Rosicrucian lineages, which is somewhat of an ironic term, as the entire legacy of the Rosicrucians may have started with a literary hoax. I believe they're called a ludibrium, sort of a hoax slash fake treasure hunt, if you will. Potentially. A potential hoax that has inspired what are, for the most part, fairly benevolent works. Crowley, old Uncle Al, radically redefined the concept in The Vision and the Voice, 1911, and Magic Without Tears, also 1911, I think. In Crowley's magical system, which is Thelema, as well as his operating order, the Astrum Argentum, or AA, probably belonged in NA, to be honest, but anywho, oh God, this terminology gets me every time. A Black Brother is an adept who attempts to cross the great metaphysical gulf known as the Abyss, associated with the demon Choronzon, who will also be getting an episode on his own soon, but refuses to surrender their individual ego or personality to the universe, to the one, the whole, the monad, etc. Instead of becoming a master of the temple who pours their blood into the chalice of Babylon, the aspirant seals their ego into a protective shell, a crystallized ego. Crowley posited that these Black Brothers formed the true Black Lodge, a connection of isolated spiritual vampires who must continually absorb energy, political power, and the life force of others to prevent their own inevitable spiritual disintegration. Dion Fortune, a former Golden Dawn member and founder of the Society of the Inner Light, expanded on the real-world operational tactics of the Black Lodge in her 1930 classics Psychic Self-Defense, as well as Sane Occultism. Fortune described the Black Lodge as an active physical and astral network of lodge masters who utilized telepathic suggestion, vampiric astral ties, and ritualized manipulation to drive their rivals insane, or secure financial backing, or destabilize socio-political institutions. From the 1870s to 1890s, secret societies like Pascal Beverly Randolph's Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, also an interesting figure who will be getting their own episode somewhere down the road soon, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, and its successor, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, led by two gentlemen named Max Theon and Peter Davidson, who taught practical sex magic, practical astrology, and mirror scrying. The Theosophical Society under Blavatsky publicly attacked the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light as a front for the Black Lodge due to its emphasis on practical sexual alchemy rather than ascetic celibacy and Spartan living as far as esoteric pursuits are concerned. Conversely, members of the HB of L, Light, Luxor, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go with Luxor because it just sounds cooler. Viewed Theosophy as a dangerous, passive Eastern cult that rendered Western minds vulnerable to astral subversion. The French traditionalist philosopher René Guénon? I'm going to go with Guénon, whatever. You'll hear me say it differently probably. I'm not sure quite how it's pronounced. Anywho, Guénon brought a sociological and historical lens to the Black Lodge concept in his book, The Reign of Quantity and the Signs of the Times, 1945. Guénon used the term counter-initiation to describe real historic organizations operating in secrecy to invert sacred traditions and usher in the modern, purely materialist age. I would say they succeeded dramatically. Guénon asserted that pseudo-occult groups, subversive political movements, and fake gurus were consciously or unconsciously being manipulated by a central circle of counter-initiation, aka the Black Lodge, working to dismantle true spiritual authority. This kind of falls in line with a concept he created or coined called synarchy, which is the opposite of anarchy, basically. It's just, I think it's supposed to be a combination of syndicate and anarchy, but it's basically just the rule over the many by a secret elite few. In the mid to late 20th century, Kenneth Grant, head of the Typhonian OTO, former secretary to Crowley and star of our last episode, reframed the Black Lodge through his Typhonian trilogies, especially The Night Side of Eden. Grant argued that what mainstream occultists labeled the Black Lodge was actually the exploration of the night side of the Tree of Life, or the Qliphoth, and extra-dimensional intelligences via Da'ath, or the Abyss, on the Tree of Life/Death. Rather than a moral evil, Grant viewed this dark stream as a vital, primordial technology for contacting non-human entities and unlocking deep subconscious power. Now, when historians, academic scholars, and various researchers of Western occultism, esotericism, step away from purely speculative fiction and look for physical candidate organizations that embody the operational, ideological, or socio-political traits of a true Black Lodge, several primary historical suspects emerge. The first of which is the Order of the Golden and Rosy Cross, or as it was better known, Gold und Rosenkreuz, an epicenter of 18th century high-degree Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism in Prussia. While often overlooked in modern pop culture, the Gold und Rosenkreuz is perhaps the purest historical example of a secretive, conservative, esoteric lodge taking total hidden control over a major world superpower. Founded in Germany in the mid-18th century, this order combined high-grade Masonic hierarchy with practical alchemy, spiritual manipulation, and strict obedience. Strictest of obedience. In the 1780s, two high-ranking Rosicrucians named Johann Christoph von Wüllner and Johann Rudolf von Bischofwerder secretly initiated King Friedrich Wilhelm II of Prussia. Through the king, Wüllner and Bischofwerder effectively ran the Prussian state from behind the curtains of the world stage. They established harsh religious censorship laws, such as the Edict of Religion of 1788, purged Enlightenment thinkers from universities, used state funds for secret alchemical laboratories, and manipulated national geopolitics to align with their lodge's apocalyptic Rosicrucian worldview. Oh, we'll get into it. To historians of political occultism, this represents a textbook case of an esoteric Black Lodge usurping state authority. To understand what a, quote, apocalyptic Rosicrucian worldview, unquote, meant to the 18th century Gold und Rosenkreuz, or Order of the Golden and Rosy Cross, one must look past notions of political ideology and step into a mindset that viewed statecraft as a cosmic battle for humanity's soul. For figures like Johann Christoph von Wollner and Johann Rudolf von Bischofwerder, history was not an ongoing progression of human achievements, but a rapidly declining era hurtling towards imminent divine judgment. Rooted in what's called chiliastic, I believe that's how you pronounce it, or is basically millennium-based theology. Their belief system held that Adam's original fall from grace had physically and spiritually fractured the universe. Humanity was now trapped in the final decaying era of world history, and it was the sacred duty of a chosen spiritual elite to purify society. Oh boy. We all know what happens when these guys get together. Nothing good's going to come out of this. It was their duty to heal creation and prepare Prussia for the impending apocalypse and imminent, any day now, return of Jesus the Christ. This deep apocalyptic anxiety was directly linked to a violent opposition to the Age of Enlightenment, or the Aufklärung. Aufklärung. I think that's what they called it in German back in the day. While earlier 17th century Rosicrucian movements had embraced scientific curiosity and social reform, the 18th century Gold- und Rosenkreuzer viewed rationalism, secular skepticism, and religious tolerance, the very ideals championed by King Frederick the Great, ironically enough, as a demonic conspiracy. To Wollner and Bischofwerder, the Enlightenment's emphasis on human reason over divine mystery was the ultimate sign of end times heretical thought. They believed that by abandoning traditional biblical authority, European society was inviting its own cosmic level destruction. Therefore, saving the state required a total counter-revolution, eradicating secular philosophy, purging freethinkers, and enforcing a much more strict, unquestioning religious conformity under the guidance of secret esoteric wisdom possessed by a hidden elite, a occult aristocracy, if you will. Within this framework, alchemy served as both a practical tool and a spiritual imperative. Far from being a hobby or primitive science, alchemy was viewed by the order as a holy mechanism granted by God to redeem corrupt physical matter. The process of transmuting base metals into gold or crafting the Philosopher's Stone was seen as a literal cleansing of matter's fallen state, mirroring the spiritual purification required of the human soul. When Wollner and Bischofwerder gained control of Prussian state funds using public money, set up a multiple secret alchemical laboratories that wasn't viewed as corruption in their minds. Funding these experiments was a very necessary investment in the divine technology needed to heal a broken world before its final judgment. Ultimately, this worldview demanded the total submission of state policy to esoteric theology, turning the Prussian government into a vehicle for an apocalyptic theocracy. You know how those are. Believing that the ignorant masses couldn't save themselves, the order initiated Prince Friedrich Wilhelm II to secure a monarch through whom God could rule. Once in power behind the scenes, they used the full force of the state to realize their vision, enacting the harsh edict of religion in 1788 to silence rationalist intellectuals like the philosopher Immanuel Kant. He can't anymore. Banning anti-clerical texts and steering foreign policy to combat rival esoteric groups such as the infamous Bavarian Illuminati. They were actually the good guys in this context. To historians of political occultism, their reign remains a classic example of an apocalyptic worldview in action. A small secret society capturing the apparatus of a powerful military state, not for territory or wealth, but to wage a mystical war for the end of the world. Next on the list of potential candidates is, oddly enough, the aforementioned Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, a 19th century Anglo-French secret society active during the 1870s to 1890s. As noted in the History of the Theosophical Society, Madame Blavatsky explicitly labeled the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor as a primary front for the Brothers of the Shadow, aka the Black Lodge. Led by figures such as Max Theon and Peter Davidson, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor offered paid practical occult instructions via correspondence, focusing heavily on practical sex magic, mirror scrying, and planetary magic. Unlike other orders seeking spiritual liberation or ascetic enlightenment, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor emphasized the materialization of spirits and practical personal power. Blavatsky claimed the lodge was a vampiric organization that bound seekers to lower astral entities, exploited them financially, and traded in dangerous left-hand path practical sorcery disguised as ancient wisdom. Beyond the direct admonitions of Madame Blavatsky, modern esoteric historians and traditionalists find genuine reasons why the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor earned its reputation as a real-world candidate for the Black Lodge. The primary issue lays in its transactional model, which commodified sorcery by offering secret practical occult training, including planetary talismans, mirror scrying, and practical sex magic, via mail-order correspondence in exchange for substantial membership fees. Unlike contemporary esoteric orders that demanded rigorous ascetic discipline, moral purity, or self-transcendence, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor actively catered to the material desires of its initiates. By teaching techniques designed to influence external reality, attract physical wealth, and manipulate sexual energy for personal empowerment, the lodge operated on a philosophy of material gain rather than actual spiritual illumination. So says the critics at the time, specifically Blavatsky, especially Blavatsky. To classical traditionalists like René Guénon, this focus on personal empowerment, self-aggrandizement, and the subversion of spiritual forces for worldly ends defines the left-hand path. This perception was further solidified when financial corruption and criminal scandals exposed the order's internal workings. In 1886, a major scandal broke when it was revealed that Thomas Henry Burgoyne, the order's secretary and primary medium for channeled instructions, was actually Thomas Dalton, a man who'd been legally convicted of mail fraud and theft in Leeds a few years earlier. When the scandal erupted, leaders like Peter Davidson fled the United States to evade public fallout, nothing suspicious about that, where they attempted to establish communal experiments while continuing to sell secret teachings, quote-unquote secret teachings. This reliance on mail-order occultism, combined with documented financial exploitation and legal fraud, led critics across the esoteric world to view the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor not as a holy sanctuary of ancient wisdom, but as a predatory, vampiric enterprise that used sorcery as a facade for psychological manipulation and financial gain. However, many other modern scholars would argue that the Black Lodge label was heavily exaggerated and born out of a bitter business rivalry rather than genuine demonic conspiracy. In the late 19th century, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor was the primary competitor to Blavatsky's Theosophical Society for the souls and wallets of Western seekers. While Theosophy was shifting toward Eastern philosophy, asceticism, and obedience to invisible Mahatmas, somewhere in India, somewhere. They're out there somewhere. The secret chiefs, etc. The Brotherhood of Luxor offered a uniquely Western Hermetic framework that championed practical experiential results over passive devotion. Rather than operating as an evil, shadowy cabal attempting to subvert civilization, historical evidence suggests that the HB was largely an ambitious and somewhat mercenary occult enterprise whose combination of controversial sex magic techniques, mail-order monetization, and fraudulent leadership made it an easy target for rival societies looking to brand their enemies as Brothers of the Shadow, as a legitimate Black Lodge. Theosophy itself, however, is not without its many, many controversies. Too many to get into here. Then there's another candidate. There's the Fraternitas Saturni, or Brotherhood of Saturn, a Weimar-era Germanic esoteric society founded in 1926 that lasted through the post-World War II era and into our modern day. They're still around. If Crowley's Argentum Astrum or the Golden Dawn represented the mainstream Western right-hand or balanced paths, the Fraternitas Saturni is often cited as the premier, highly organized left-hand path magical lodge of the 20th century. Formed in Berlin following a schism with Crowley at the Weda Conference of 1925, this is basically a all-hands-on-deck OTO, I believe, international summit to kind of get the gist of things, how the a State of the Union address for occult orders to a degree. The order, which was led by Gregor Gregorius, a.k.a. Eugen Grosch, incorporated Thelema but shifted its core cosmology towards a cold, dark, Saturnian/Gnostic framework. The Fraternitas Saturni operated on a strict 33-grade Masonic structure, incorporating, quote, Luciferian Gnosticism, unquote, and advanced sex magic, such as the Gradus Pentalphi, quote unquote. They explicitly embrace Saturn as the cold governor of karma, discipline, and dark intelligence. Rather than viewing Lucifer or Saturn as evil, quote unquote evil, they saw these forces as the dark light bearers enabling an adept to break free of cosmic constraints, making them, in the eyes of traditionalists like René Guénon, a prime real-world manifestation of what he calls counter-initiation. The historical trajectory of this Saturnian current extends into one of the most chilling chapters of 20th century occult lore, the alleged confrontation between the Czech Hermetic master Franz Bardon and a shadowy, predatory offshoot of these Weimar-era lodges. In his autobiographical text, Frabato the Magician, Bardon details this encounter with an elite, ultra-secretive order known as the FOGC, or Freemasonic Order of the Golden Centurion, widely understood by esoteric historians and researchers to be a fictionalized or hyper-exaggerated depiction of the inner circle satellite groups surrounding the Fraternitas Saturni. The FOGC was described as a 99-member Black Lodge, composed of wealthy industrialists, politicians, and high-degree occultists, bound together by pacts of material power, sex magic, and Saturnian ego domination. The group allegedly maintained its dark bargain through an infamous lottery system that demanded the periodic human sacrifice of its own members to fuel their magical operations. What set this group apart from conventional magical lodges was their fusion of ancient sorcery with modern industrial technology, most notably through an apparatus that Bardon called the Tepophone. This device was described as an optical magical condenser, a physical apparatus featuring specialized lenses, copper coils, a concentrated light source, and a central focal plate designed to act as an occult death ray. Fucking A. By placing an astral link to a target, such as a photograph, some hair, or a blood sample, onto the device's focal point, the operator could focus and project lethal, highly concentrated life force or destructive elemental energy across vast distances directly into a victim's subtle body. Spiritual attack. The resulting assault would manifest physically as sudden violent fevers, organ failure, or fatal strokes, destroying the target from a distance while leaving zero forensic evidence for conventional investigators to uncover. According to Bardon's accounts from the 1930s, the Order recognized his extraordinary magical abilities and attempted to forcibly recruit him into their ranks. When Bardon refused their overtures and rejected their left-hand path philosophy, a brutal invisible magical war erupted between him and the lodge's leadership. Bardon claimed to have survived multiple targeted attacks from the Tepophone by constructing advanced astral shields and deflecting the lethal energy back towards its operators, leading to the ultimate downfall and physical destruction of several lodge members. In the broader history of political occultism and counter-initiation, this clash represents the apex of Weimar-era Dark Lodge paranoia, a surreal convergence where cold Saturnian Gnosticism, secret lodge politics, and lethal techno-magical weaponry met in a silent battle for spiritual supremacy. Next up, we've got what's one of the most likely candidates for a real-life, no-shit, for-real Black Lodge, and that's Propaganda Do, aka the P2 Lodge, which existed primarily during the Cold War era in Italy and operated from roughly the 1960s to 1980s. For researchers looking for a modern, non-metaphorical, cold hard facts Black Lodge, P2 is probably the ultimate real-world blueprint. Operating under the guise of a clandestine Freemasonic lodge within the Grand Orient of Italy, P2 was led by Licio Gelli, or Jelly, a former fascist black shirt and intelligence asset. There's that cult intelligence overlap again. Occult. The lodge operated an underground parallel government aimed at preventing a communist takeover of Italy. This is an extension of the CIA's Operation Gladio, also known as the Strategy of Tension. P2 brought together top military commanders, intelligence agency heads, powerful politicians, media tycoons like Silvio Berlusconi of Bunga Bunga Room infamy, and Vatican bankers like Roberto Calvi. P2 used blackmail, covert assassinations, systemic financial corruption, the Banco Ambrosiano scandal being one amongst several, and psychological warfare to steer international politics. It demonstrated how an underground lodge structure could be weaponized to bind powerful men together in a secret oath for shadow control. To understand how Propaganda Do operated, one has to look beyond standard political corruption and recognize a masterclass in clandestine state capture. Led by Licio Gelli, or Jelly, I'm just going to call him Licio for now, a former fascist blackshirt with deep ties to Western intelligence, P2 transformed a cover lodge within the Grand Orient of Italy into a subterranean parallel government. Built to execute the strategy of tension under the umbrella of Operation Gladio, the lodge aimed to manipulate Italian public life to prevent a left-wing or communist takeover at any cost. By binding high-ranking military commanders, intelligence chiefs, top politicians, media moguls, and Vatican financial architects into secret oaths of loyalty, P2 operated as if they were a shadow state. Through systemic bribery, media manipulation, and false flag violence, the order proved how the structural secrecy of an esoteric lodge could be weaponized to pull the levers of a Western democracy from behind the curtains. The sheer reach of P2's network inevitably tied the lodge to some of the most disturbing unresolved mysteries in modern Italian history, including the 1983 disappearance of 15-year-old Vatican citizen Emanuela Orlandi. As investigations into her kidnapping unfolded, the trial repeatedly intersected the dark financial nexus shared by P2, the Vatican Bank, and the Rome-based criminal syndicate known as the Banda della Magliana. Key figures named in the Orlandi intrigue, such as Archbishop Paul Marcinkus and God's banker Roberto Calvi, were intimately linked to Licio Gelli's lodge and the catastrophic collapse of Banco Ambrosiano. I think it's Godfather 3 is the plot is largely tied into a lot of this, or a fictional representation thereof. In the web of theories surrounding her abduction, Orlandi wasn't merely a random victim, but a human bargaining chip used by criminal and esoteric factions to blackmail high-ranking Vatican officials over money laundering, political funds, and the covert financial operations overseen by P2 assets. Beyond political and financial terrorism, P2's reach even extended into the speculative folklore surrounding the Monster of Florence, or Il Mostro di Firenze case. When local police failed to definitively solve the horrific series of double murders and ritualistic mutilations targeting couples in the Tuscan countryside between 1968 and 1985, chief investigators shifted focus from a lone killer to a shadowy second level of elite orchestrators. Prosecutors hypothesized that the working-class suspects carrying out the slayings were supplying harvested body parts to an esoteric cult comprised of powerful figures, such as doctors, high magistrates, and wealthy Tuscan elites, who gathered in secret lodges to perform occult rituals. Given P2's deep roots in the region and his history of shielding high society criminals, Investigators heavily scrutinized local Masonic networks, suspecting that Gelli's Lodge or its regional offshoots provided the protection, political cover, and institutional immunity that allowed the true masterminds to evade justice for decades. Whether operating through high-level geopolitical maneuvers or the dark underbelly of unsolved Italian crimes, Propaganda Do represented the ultimate evolution of the Black Lodge model. It demonstrated that an esoteric framework didn't need mystical rituals or ancient magic to subvert a nation. Rather, the combination of secret oaths, absolute obedience, financial leverage, and institutional power was more than enough to hijack the machinery of the state and govern from the shadows. Finally, in our list of potential candidates, we have the Polestar/Fool Society complex of Volkish esotericism, operating mainly out of Munich during the 1910s to 1920s. Scholars of esoteric fascism, such as Nicholas Goodrich Clark, author of the extensively well-researched work The Occult Roots of Nazism. If you're looking for one book on occult Nazism, make it The Occult Roots of Nazism. Or the one that Joseph P. Farrell wrote. I forget the name of the book. I think it's something Black Sun. But those are probably some of the best. I mean, there's a lot of them, but those are some of the best, well-researched, highly footnoted, lots of sources to check, etc. Works on Nazi occultism. Definitive works. Anyway, Nicholas Goodrich Clark's The Occult Roots of Nazism traces how fringe, anti-Semitic occult groups acted as a dark catalyst for 20th century geopolitical horror. Organizations like the Germanenorden and its outgrowth, the Thule Society, founded by Rudolf von Sabotendorf. My God, with a name like that, how could you not be an asshole? Combined Nordic pagan myth, distorted theosophical root race theories, and secret lodge rituals. The Thule Society acted as the literal birth canal for the Nazi Party. Yuck, right? Providing the political infrastructure, symbols, i.e. the swastika, black sun, and radical ideology that radicalized figures like Dietrich Eckart and Rudolf Hess. To writers like Trevor Ravenscroft, author of The Spear of Destiny, and traditionalist philosophers, this network was a literal Black Lodge that operated a door to horrific astral currents, resulting in global slaughter and systemic horror on unprecedented scales in history. The Polestar or Hyperborean current represents one of the most sinister and obscure dimensions of early 20th century Volkish esotericism, serving as the spiritual spine for organizations like the Germanenorden and the Thule Society. Rooted in the Ariosophical doctrines of Guido von List and Jorg Lanz von Liebenfels, this cosmology inverted traditional Western astrology and spiritual geometry. Rather than orienting towards the sun or the equator, the Polestar current fixated on Polaris, the fixed star at the celestial North Pole, as the cosmic axis mundi of spiritual authority, racial purity, and divine origins. In this worldview, the North Pole wasn't merely a geographic location and home to Santa Claus, but the original spiritual homeland, Hyperborea or Ultima Thule, of a pristine, solar godlike race. According to their distorted mythic timeline, as the Earth's tilt changed and the polar ice cap crept downward, this divine race was forced south, gradually losing its supernatural abilities and spiritual clarity through cosmic degeneration and racial mixing. I don't know. If they were forced to move south because of some melting ice caps, they don't seem all that godlike. Sounds like regular cave people to me. Whatever. When Rudolf von Sabotendorf founded the Thule Society in Munich in 1918 as a front for the Germanenorden, he brought this Polestar ideology directly into the crucible of post-World War II German politics. The order believed that to reverse Germany's defeat and reclaim its cosmic destiny, they had to reactivate this northern polar or Hyperborean spiritual current. This wasn't pursued solely through intellectual study, but through martial occult rituals, runic magic, and aggressive political terrorism. By adopting the swastika, an ancient solar and polar symbol representing the rotation of the heavens around the fixed center, the Thule Society sought to anchor this primordial cold polar force into the physical realm. They viewed themselves as the earthly vanguard of an invisible polar priesthood, tasked with purging the quote-unquote decay of modern democracy, internationalism, and Judeo-Christian morality to make way for a total spiritual and political rebirth. The real-world manifestation of this esoteric framework was the creation of the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or DAP. You ain't shaking my fucking hands. By Thule members, an obscure workers' party that Adolf Hitler would soon command and reshape into the Nazi Party, or the NSDAP. Key Thule figure Dietrich Eckart explicitly viewed Hitler as the long-prophesied quote-unquote vessel, or physical instrument, capable of channeling this violent restorative polar force to the German masses. To esoteric historians like Mr. Goodrick Clark and sensationalist writers like Trevor Ravenscroft, this network was the definitive 20th century Black Lodge, and they're not going to get any argument from me. I would say that this group definitely acts as at least a very model of the stereotypical Black Lodge. An organization that tapped into dark atavistic racial myths, channeled them through a disciplined secret society structure, and weaponized them into a mass political movement. Through this Hyperborean complex, a fringe mixture of polar mythology, distorted occultism, and violent anti-Semitism was transformed into the supreme ideology of a militarized state, ultimately unleashing a wave of global warfare and industrial-scale genocide. The label Black Lodge or Black Magician has rarely been an objective technical description of someone's ritual practices. Instead, it was routinely weaponized as a rhetorical sledgehammer to demonize, ostracize, and criminalize anyone whose personal identity, sexuality, race, or politics threatened the dominant cultural or religious hierarchy. The moment an occultist or secret society stepped outside of the standard 19th or early 20th century social norms, their rivals didn't just call them sinful or immoral, they accused them of being an agent of a dark, global, if not cosmic level conspiracy. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, homosexuality and non-normative sexual practices were treated not only as legal crimes, but as literal entry points for astral corruption or black magic. Pascal Beverly Randolph, or P.B. Randolph, a free black occultist who introduced practical sex magic to the West, was relentlessly targeted. Enemies and rival lodge leaders attacked his sexual magical theories as filthy black magic, quote unquote, heavily blending racial prejudice with moral panic over sex. When the Golden Dawn fractured, rival factions routinely whispered that Crowley's bisexual practices and interest in sex magic were proof that he was an agent of the Black Lodge. To Victorian and Edwardian occultists, any sexual expression outside of traditional heteronormativity was framed as vampiric or energy draining, traits typically assigned to Black Lodge adepts. In Imperial Germany, a massive scandal erupted involving high-ranking government officials who were homosexuals, primarily the quote-unquote Round Table, around Prince Philip von Eulenburg. Nationalists and conservative press outlets framed this circle as a dark occultist camarilla, quote-unquote, that's the word they used, effectively an aristocratic Black Lodge of quote-unquote perverts, manipulating the Kaiser and subverting the military spirit of the state. Accusations of Black Lodge membership almost always carried heavy xenophobic undertones as well. If a ritual or tradition came from a non-European culture or didn't fit Western Christian/Rosicrucian frameworks, it was systematically degraded as dark or counter-initiatic. In 19th century France and 20th century Germany, conservative occultists and right-wing political agitators explicitly merged the Black Lodge concept with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Texts like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion were heavily influenced by French occultist Eliat Levin, and later popularized by various Volkish groups, who framed Kabbalistic study and Jewish esotericists as the, quote, hidden black hand, unquote, orchestrating all the world revolutions taking place at the time. Early theosophists, including Blavatsky, used Tibetan terminology to designate the Black Lodge, specifically calling dark sorcerers Dugpas, quote-unquote Dugpas, referring to the Drugpa Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism, or linking them to the pre-Buddhist Bon religion. They painted indigenous, non-Western, or shamanic spiritual traditions as quote-unquote primitive sorcery, opposed to the quote white/pure unquote Western or Aryo-Vedic Mahatmas. The Black Lodge accusation was also a favorite tool for political smear campaigns. After the 1917 Russian Revolution, conservative traditionalist occultists, most prominently René Guénon and various right-wing Rosicrucians, argued that communism, socialism, and radical egalitarianism weren't merely political economic models, they were counter-initiatic subversions, quote-unquote, designed by the Black Lodge to destroy spiritual order, referred to as ma'at, or tradition in most occult contexts, and drag humanity into purely material degradation, as if they needed help. Conservative Catholic counter-revolutionaries in Europe routinely labeled all left-leaning, secular, or Republican Masonic lodges like the Grand Orient of France as Black Lodges or, quote, synagogues of Satan, unquote, that used occult subversion to overthrow monarchies and secularize society. To fully grasp how the concept of the Black Lodge crossed over into the UFO phenomenon, one must look at the pioneering work of Bishop or Tau Allen Greenfield. He's a bishop of the New Gnostic Church, or Neo-Gnostic Church. I forget the exact name, but the Gnostic Church. A veteran esotericist and ufologist whose studies redefined the entire contactee subculture. In his now classic works like Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts and Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, Greenfield argued that the physical aliens, quote-unquote aliens, of 20th century ufology and the praetor-human entities of Western ceremonial magic are fundamentally the same phenomenon, which he termed ultra-terrestrials, utilizing the phraseology coined by John Keel. Greenfield asserted that occultists like Crowley and Jack Parsons weren't merely practicing symbolic magic, they were actively making contact with non-human intelligences, such as the entity Aiwass or the infamous Lamb, using precise ritual protocols. Crucially, Greenfield demonstrated that both high-degree occultists and mid-century UFO contactees were receiving messages coded in the exact same mathematical frequency traceable through a hidden English Kabbalah or secret cipher embedded within esoteric texts. Within this framework, the historic struggle between the White Lodge and the Black Lodge shifted from a purely spiritual debate into an interdimensional war for human consciousness. The Black Lodge, in Greenfield's ufological view, represents a network of human adepts and shadowy ultra-terrestrial entities who use secret ciphers, technological deception, and psychological manipulation to bind humanity to lower astral states, keeping them blind to the true nature of the cosmos. Outside of Greenfield's immensely interesting work, the crossover between the Black Lodge and its occult traditions and the Men in Black, or MIB, is a rich subgenre of esoteric ufology. Long before modern pop culture turned the MIB into suit-wearing government bureaucrats who can get jiggy with it, early UFO researchers, occultists, and fringe investigators viewed MIB as astral entities, demonic projections, or agents of counter-initiatic orders. The origin of the Men in Black mythos begins with Albert K. Bender, founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952, and publisher Gray Barker, whose 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, introduced MIBs to the world. While popular memory recalls Bender's visitors as federal agents, Bender's own account in Flying Saucers and the Three Men, 1962, reveals an encounter that was almost purely ritualistic and astral. Bender described three figures dressed in black suits and dark slouch hats who didn't pull up in a car, but materialized in his bedroom during trance or out-of-body states. These encounters were accompanied by a heavy smell of sulfur, a classical indicator of demonic or black magical summonings, glowing red eyes, and feelings of severe psychic vampirism. Early commenters noted that Bender's visitors behaved identically to the Brothers of the Shadow described by Helena Blavatsky, dark astral adepts who manifest to threaten and silence esoteric seekers when they get too close to unmasking hidden truths. Investigative journalist and ultra-terrestrial theorist John Keel of The Mothman Prophecies, Disneyland of the Gods, Our Haunted Planet, and many other great books, moved entirely away from the extraterrestrial nuts and bolts hypothesis, framing Men in Black as manifestations of an ancient non-human intelligence. Keel argued that MIBs aren't government agents or aliens from another planet, but ultra-terrestrial beings from a parallel electromagnetic spectrum who have interacted with humanity for millennia under different disguises, such as fairies, demons, black cloak inquisitors, plague doctors, and now MIB. Keel documented that MIBs exhibited absurd, non-physical behavior, strange robotic cadences, inability to consume human food, vanishing into thin air, and leaving behind smells of ozone or brimstone. Keel frequently drew direct parallels between the psychological manipulation used by MIBs and the operational tactics of historical Black Lodges and demonic pacts. Crucial to this crossover between early ufology and occultism were Meade Lane and his successor Riley Crabb. For more info on them, I've done 2 episodes covering the history of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, or BSRF. But these guys started the group Meade Lane started the group in the late 1940s. Riley Crabb was his successor in the late 50s, early 60s, I believe it was. Decades before John Keel popularized the term ultra-terrestrials, Lane pioneered the 4D etheric hypothesis, arguing that flying saucers weren't physical spaceships from distant planets, but materialized out of higher vibrational planes or etheric realms. Lane himself was a high-degree Western Hermetic initiate, and Riley Crabb explicitly framed the broader UFO landscape as a battleground between the Cosmic White Lodge and the Black Lodge. In the publications of the BSRF, which, if you can get a hold, they're on the internet all over, check the Internet Archive, but every single one of them makes for interesting, entertaining reading, I'll say that much. But Riley Crabb repeatedly warned that certain UFO contactees and secret government factions were being subverted by Black Lodge astral entities attempting to engineer a totalitarian, mind-controlling global society. Psychic despotism. To the Borderland researchers, the Men in Black were neither federal agents nor extraterrestrials, but the physical and astral enforcers of this Black Lodge. Negative etheric projections deployed to suppress human spiritual awakening and protect the secret technology of counter-initiatic cabals. Once again, the collective evolution of mankind is the name of the game. This esoteric framework aligns closely with comparative folklore, particularly the work of researchers like Jacques Vallée, Passport to Magonia, and folklore scholars, who highlighted the striking point-for-point structural parallels between modern UFO and MIB encounters and early modern European witch trials. In the 16th and 17th century witch trials, accused witches routinely reported being visited by a tall, mysterious figure dressed entirely in black, often referred to in trial records as the Black Man, by which they mean jet black, like black as night, coal black. The master of the Sabbat, or an earthly agent of the devil. Much like the modern Men in Black, this figure appeared unbidden, offered secret knowledge or magical pacts, and moved with unnatural stiffness, as if phasing in and out of our dimensional frequency, etc. And they possessed dark or glowing eyes as well. In historic witch trials, inquisitors searched the bodies of the accused for the devil's mark or witch's mark, which were unnatural, painless scars, red welts, or numb spots on the skin where blood could not be drawn. Modern abduction researchers, such as Bud Hopkins and Dr. John Mack, noted that UFO abductees frequently wake up with unexplained scoop marks, quote-unquote scoop marks, triangular scars, or small subcutaneous implants following encounters with non-human entities. The folklore of the witch's Sabbat involved what's called the transvestition. I believe that's how you say it. Transvestition, or nocturnal flight, where the initiate was transported through walls or across vast distances while in a paralyzed trance-like state. This mirrors the classic UFO abduction narrative, where witnesses experience sudden sleep paralysis, are floated through solid glass windows via light beams, and brought to cold, sterile environments overseen by dark-robed or suit-wearing entities. Seen through this comparative lens, the modern Men in Black and the Black Lodge are simply the latest cultural masks worn by an ancient, recurring phenomenon. Whether described as the Black Man, quote-unquote, offering a grimoire to an early modern witch, a demonic astral projection harassing Albert Bender, or an ultra-terrestrial enforcer silencing a UFO witness, the archetype remains identical. A dark, non-human agency acting as the gatekeeper of forbidden knowledge, enforcing silence through terror, paralysis, and psychic manipulation. Conspiracy researcher Jim Keith wrote one of the most comprehensive breakdowns of the MIB/occult intersection in his 1997 book, Casebook on the Men in Black. Keith dedicated entire chapters, such as Black Arts, Demons and Witches, and Black Lodge, to analyzing MIB incidents. He argued that MIB encounters straddle the realms of ritual magic, psychological operations, or psyops, and mind control. Keith posited that MIBs could be physical or astral projections generated by human secret societies, or Black Lodges, utilizing occult ritual technology combined with military-grade psychological warfare to enforce silence, co-opt UFO contactees or civilian research groups, and hide advanced terrestrial research. In pop culture, Mark Frost, co-creator of Twin Peaks alongside David Lynch, explicitly fused the historical Black Lodge with MIB lore. In The Secret History of Twin Peaks and Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier, Frost drew directly from 1930s occultist writings, such as Dion Fortune and Blavatsky as well. Rosicrucian/Masonic lodge structures and Project Blue Book history were also incorporated into the show's overall mythology. Frost framed the Black Lodge not just as a spiritual realm of shadow entities like Bob or the Woodsman, but as a force interacting directly with governmental intelligence agencies, Roswell, and the historical Men in Black who stalked early ufologists. Twin Peaks would probably be one of the best overall contemporary portrayals of high strangeness, occult/ufology intersection. The only problem with that show is all of the goddamn soap opera bullshit. It's almost like it's just too much. It's too much. It makes the show. I love the mythology and I love a lot of things about the show, but like the ridiculous 90s/late 80s soap opera aspects of a lot of it is hard to sit through. But it's worth it overall. If you haven't watched the show, check it out. Alan Greenfield's body of work, most notably The Secrets of the Real Black Lodge Revealed, The Story of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, and Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, represents a crucial synthesis of how these strands intersect in the modern era. Greenfield approaches the Black Lodge not merely as a metaphor for spiritual failure, but as a tangible historical phenomenon deeply interwoven with secret societies, esoteric rites, and ultra-terrestrial contact. Drawing on his background in the OTO, Freemasonry, and ufology, like Greenfield has been like on the ground. He's been there since the beginning. Like he was hanging out with Bender and all these other guys like from the get-go. So he's been boots on the ground since day one, pretty much. Greenfield tracks how 19th century organizations like Randolph's Hermetic Brotherhood of Light and Theodore Royce's early OTO developed ritualized methods such as sex magic and Kabbalistic ciphers like the NAEQ, North American English Kabbalah, Class A book ciphers, etc., to establish communication with non-human intelligences, termed the secret chiefs or euphonauts or ultra-terrestrials. Now, again, me personally, I don't put a lot of stock in gematria and Kabbalistic word number games, but if you've hit a total brick wall, I can see how they might help out in trying to help you decipher things, or as just plain old use for like cryptographic reasons, for coding and deciphering various works, etc. In Greenfield's framework, the Black Lodge manifests when these ritual communications and secret society networks become corrupted by human military intelligence apparatuses, egotistical power grabs, or rogue magical orders. He connects the historical manifestations of the Men in Black and bizarre occult agents to these counter-initiatic forces, suggesting that MIB phenomena are often physical or astral projections generated by Black Lodge adepts or rogue secret society operatives seeking to police, silence, or co-opt independent researchers who stumble upon genuine methods of non-human contact. Beyond the historical lodges and occult orders examined thus far, perhaps the most compelling real-world manifestation of the Black Lodge paradigm emerges from the post-World War II American military-industrial intelligence complex. This shadow network, with its roots in Nazi esotericism and its branches extending to contemporary defense and aerospace industries, embodies many characteristics traditionally attributed to the Black Lodge: secret knowledge, ritualized manipulation, psychological control, and the pursuit of power through hidden means. This stretches off into, breakaway civilization, secret space program, etc. So many avenues from this jump-off point. The foundation of this modern Black Lodge was laid through Operation Paperclip, a secret United States intelligence program that brought more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, as well as, I'm sure, a few doctors and psychiatrists from former Nazi Germany to the U.S. for government employment between 1945 and 1959. That I didn't know until researching that this went on that long. Like, I thought it was like an immediate thing, like, boom, scoop them up before the communists get them. But no, this program went on for quite a while. Anywho, despite President Truman's official directive prohibiting the recruitment of Nazi party members, the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency systematically overlooked these restrictions, with recruiters even marking the most valuable scientists' files the perfect assets with paperclips to indicate their recruitment priority, hence the name. For anyone wondering how intelligence agencies and military organizations come up with their code names, it's just that easy. Among those imported were figures like Werner von Braun, director of the Peenemünde Military Research Center, where the V-2 rocket was developed. These scientists had been instrumental in developing Nazi Germany's advanced weaponry, and their expertise was quickly redirected toward America's emerging military-industrial complex. As journalist Annie Jacobson documents, this operation effectively imported not just scientific expertise, but the ideological framework that had underpinned Nazi research programs. The continuation of Nazi methodologies became most apparent in Project MK-Ultra, an illegal human experimentation program designed by the CIA to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used in altering human behavior. American historian Stephen Kinsner has noted that MK-Ultra was essentially a continuation of earlier Nazi experiments, particularly evident in its use of mescaline on unwitting subjects, replicating previous Nazi experiments conducted at Dachau. I would characterize pretty much all of MK-Ultra as dark shamanism. Like, if you're using drugs for psychonautical, esoteric/ritual purposes, that's what this is. So, where is the demarcation line? What makes MK-Ultra particularly significant from an esoteric perspective is its function as a form of dark shamanism. Using psychedelic substances and psychological techniques to manipulate consciousness, not for enlightenment, but for control. The program administered high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, my goodness, the LSD, to subjects without their consent, often in controlled environments where researchers observed their effects from behind one-way mirrors. This weaponization of consciousness-altering substances represents a perversion of traditional shamanic practices, turning tools of spiritual exploration into instruments of psychological domination. The connections between MK-Ultra and Nazi scientists were explicit. As documented in Mind Control, From Nazis to DARPA, Nazi scientists who conducted mind control experiments on prisoners at Dachau were recruited through Operation Paperclip and subsequently participated in U.S. mind control programs. Figures like Kurt Blohm Sorry. That name is fun to say. Blom. Who had conducted chemical warfare experiments for the Nazis, became involved in MKUltra research. The American intelligence apparatus's exploration of esoteric phenomena extended beyond chemical manipulation into the realms of psychic abilities. Project Stargate, which ran from the 1970s until its supposed decommission in 1995, was a Defense Department program dedicated to investigating and weaponizing psychic phenomena, particularly remote viewing. This program had its roots in the early 1950s, when the Defense Department tasked Henry Andrija Puharich with researching mushrooms that might unlock psychic powers, a project the CIA was simultaneously pursuing under MKUltra. During this period, Puharich also studied faith healers, though much of his research remains classified by the Atomic Energy Commission, of all agencies, which is very odd. I did an episode way back in the day covering Puharich, but I've learned a lot more about him and grown as a person and podcaster since then. So he's definitely getting a redo at some point in the not-too-distant future. When ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, which became DARPA, throw a defense in the front, makes it sound a little better, evaluated supposed psychics like Uri Geller, they found methodological flaws in their experiments, including loose laboratory controls and researcher bias influencing outcomes. Nevertheless, the government's investment in these programs demonstrates a systematic attempt to harness paranormal phenomena for military and intelligence purposes, a clear manifestation of counter-initiatic forces seeking to co-opt spiritual abilities for worldly power. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, now DARPA proper, represents the contemporary evolution of this Black Lodge paradigm. According to recent research, DARPA is developing a, quote, classified U.S. world mind control weapon program in full development, unquote, organized in, quote, illicit association with corrupt governments, American universities, technology transnationalists, unquote, and other entities. This technological approach to mind control extends beyond chemical manipulation into direct neurological intervention. Universities that participated in MKUltra also continue their collaborations with DARPA, suggesting an unbroken lineage of research into consciousness manipulation. The development of advanced neurotechnologies, brain-computer interfaces, and directed energy weapons represents a new form of technological sorcery, using scientific knowledge to manipulate human consciousness and behavior from a distance. What emerges from the historical examination is a clear continuum of esoteric practices and methodologies transferred from Nazi Germany to post-war American intelligence agencies. The Nazi interest in occultism, advanced technology, and methods of psychological control found new expression through these imported scientists and their American collaborators. As documented in The Nazis Next Door by Erich Lichtblau, Operation Paperclip effectively made America a safe haven for Hitler's men. These scientists brought not only technological expertise, but ideological frameworks that aligned with traditional characteristics of the Black Lodge. Hierarchical secrecy, the pursuit of power through hidden knowledge, and the willingness to violate ethical boundaries in service of perceived greater goals. The American military-industrial intelligence complex thus functions as a modern Black Lodge, a network of secret organizations operating beyond democratic oversight, utilizing esoteric knowledge, whether technological or psychological, and pursuing control through manipulation rather than consent. Its combination of advanced technology, psychological operations, and esoteric experimentation represents a uniquely American manifestation of the counter-initiatic forces described by traditionalist thinkers like René Guénon. Perhaps most significantly, this modern Black Lodge differs from its historical predecessors in its technological sophistication and global reach. Where earlier manifestations operated through ritual magic and occult societies, the American intelligence industrial complex employs neuroscience, advanced technology, and psychological manipulation to achieve similar ends. The control of human consciousness and behavior for purposes of power and domination. In this context, the American military-industrial intelligence complex emerges as perhaps the most visible and viable real-world candidate for the actual Black Lodge, a network that combines the secrecy, ritualized manipulation, and pursuit of forbidden knowledge traditionally associated with the concept, while adding unprecedented technological capabilities and global influence. The Black Lodge concept has proven remarkably resilient across centuries, adapting to new cultural contexts while maintaining its core function as an explanatory framework for perceived spiritual corruption and hidden manipulation. From Blavatsky's cosmic dualism to modern ufological conspiracy theories, the Black Lodge serves as a powerful symbol of counter-initiatic forces working against spiritual evolution and human liberation. What makes the Black Lodge paradigm so enduring is its flexibility. It can be applied to rival occult orders, political enemies, sexual minorities, foreign spiritual traditions, or even mysterious visitors from beyond our conventional reality. In each case, the Black Lodge serves to externalize anxieties about hidden control, spiritual corruption, and the subversion of perceived natural or divine order. Whether viewed as a literal network of sorcerers, a metaphor for psychological processes, or a framework for understanding paranormal phenomena, the Black Lodge remains one of the most potent and complex concepts in the history of Western occultism. Its continued relevance speaks to persistent human concerns about hidden forces shaping our world, the true nature of spiritual authority, and the boundaries between enlightenment and damnation. The Black Lodge phenomena represents a fascinating intersection of spiritual history, political paranoia, occult practice, and paranormal experiences. From its origins in theosophical cosmology to its manifestations in modern ufology, the concept has served as a powerful explanatory framework for understanding perceived forces of spiritual corruption and hidden control. What emerges from this historical survey is a complex picture, not of monolithic evil, but of competing spiritual paradigms, political anxieties projected onto esoteric frameworks, and the human tendency to externalize fears about hidden manipulation. The Black Lodge has functioned variously as a genuine spiritual concern, a weapon of sectarian rivalry, a tool of political persecution, and a framework for understanding genuinely anomalous experiences. And as we continue to navigate a world of increasing complexity, where hidden forces, whether corporate, governmental, technological, or spiritual, shape our lives in ways we struggle to comprehend, the Black Lodge paradigm offers both a warning and a lens through which to examine the shadows that dance at the edges of human consciousness. Whether one views these phenomena as literal, metaphorical, or somewhere in between, the Black Lodge remains a powerful concept for exploring the boundaries between enlightenment and control, liberation and domination, spirit and matter. In the final analysis, the Black Lodge tells us less about external forces and more about our own deepest fears. Fears of manipulation, corruption, loss of autonomy, and spiritual deception. Yet to dismiss every manifestation of the Black Lodge as mere projection or political hysteria is to miss a far darker, more deliberate esoteric tradition. Behind the paranoid folklore and sectarian rivalries lies a legitimate historical strain of high sorcery, one that does not merely seek power in the material world, but aims to reshape the very architecture of reality itself. This brings us to the threshold of our next episode's primary subject, the world of what I've coined as, this is the only phrasing I can come up with that encapsulates what I'm seeing over and over. Demiurgic theurgy. Now, while traditional theurgy seeks to elevate the human soul back to the pristine, unmanifest divine, theurgy literally translates to God work. Demiurgic theurgy operates in reverse. The art of manipulating, binding, and usurping the mechanics of the demiurge, the cosmic architect responsible for the flawed material prison that is our universe, our reality. So in our next episode, we'll move past the superficial rumors of Black Lodges and enter the sanctuaries of those who practice this high-level cosmic mechanics. We'll examine how rogue initiates utilized advanced ritual technology to capture astral energies, forge pacts with lower archontic entities, and build esoteric engines designed to master the physical plane from behind the veil. If the Black Lodge of popular imagination is a shadow cast by human fear, demiurgic theurgy is the actual machinery operating in that darkness. So please join us next time as we unseal the grimoires of demiurgic magic, trace the lineage of those who sought to either dethrone or ingratiate themselves with the cosmic dark architect, and explore the ultimate expression of the Black Lodge, the quest for absolute spiritual sovereignty at any cost, by any means necessary. If you're interested in doing a little extra research or just intrigued by the concept, I cannot recommend enough the book, The Game of Saturn. I know that Saturn worship, etc., the whole underlying hidden theme of Saturn-centric occultism, esotericism, etc., is fairly popular. But I think this book, The Game of Saturn, it probably lays out in the most easily absorbable revelatory framework I've seen out of all the Saturn-based esoteric melange, the whole concept, etc. I cannot recommend that book enough. It's very eye-opening, and it will be one of the primary sources for what we're going to get into in the next episode. So that's enough of me rambling. That's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys for coming along on this journey. Thank you guys for listening, for the subs, the likes, the clicks, the tic-tac, bing-bong, chicka-chang-chang, all that stuff. You guys are the best. Fucking love you. This has been Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, the podcast. I'm your host, Mike Luck, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.
Black guys drive a car like this. Ding ding. Yeah, but white guys, see, they drive a car like this.